Hello, everyone, and welcome to This Week in Fantasy Baseball. I'm John Kuh, joined by Patrick Fitzgerald. In this episode, we're going to go over the latest news and notes around baseball, recap the hitter and pitcher performances from this past week, and of course, we still got streaming recommendations at the end of the show for the last week of the season. But before we get into all of that, Patrick, how are you doing?
Hey John, I'm doing well. Just trying to get my teams across the finish line. Had a narrow loss last week in a head-to-head league, so I'm competing for the third place game. Trying to get my money back basically this week, and then RotoWire OC, just trying to get my team, across the finish line. Got actually passed in my league for the first time in months, so I fell to
Oof.
second. So trying to get back into first by the end of the year, but we'll see. How are you?
I'm doing all right. I'm in the semifinals of one of my leagues, so just trying to make sure my team is doing okay. Was ranked number one, but feels like we kind of backed into the playoffs a little bit. Pitching has not been the strong point of that team, unfortunately, thanks to a couple players named Zebby Matthews and Michael Waka, which really just ruined my Monday. Um, but yeah, still trying to hopefully get my ERA. I believe it's no longer in the tens. I think it's in the sixes. So, yeah. But beyond that, just trying to get to the finals next week. But yeah, there's not much else going on in fantasy baseball for me. And real baseball wise, the Twins are awful. So there's not really much to talk about there too.
Yeah, my opponent who I'm playing in the third place game actually had both those guys too. So
Oh,
sometimes you're on the receiving end of it, and sometimes you're the one with them in your lineup. It's just kind of how it breaks. That's why those weekly head to head they can be kind of fluky sometimes. You never know what to expect, even if you're the top seed.
exactly. Yeah, my home league does 2 week playoffs. So
Yeah,
it kind of smooths it out just a little bit more. Makes it not hurt as much. But it's really rough when you start your Monday, you have enough starts to qualify to to actually have ratios to compete with in your league, and you see your ERA is at like 10 and your WHIP's at like 1.6. And you're like, this is not going to go well for this week. I'm just gonna have to figure out a way to win without winning those categories.
yep. Add as many streamers as you can because the ratios are only going to get better from there.
Pretty much, yeah. Thank goodness Michael McGreevy was on that team and he actually like stabilized it
Yeah,
just a little bit on Monday. So
yeah, you
shout
did.
out to you obviously for that recommendation.
Absolutely.
Uh, but anyways, before we get into the rest of the episode, just a reminder, you can follow our podcast on Twitter at ThisWeekPL. You could send us your fantasy baseball questions to our email at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. Lastly, make sure you subscribe to or follow the podcast on whatever streaming platform you listen to. We're on all of them: Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube. Wherever you listen, make sure you follow us and leave a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. All right, we're going to move into injury notes. And for a lot of these, I don't know how consequential it's going to be because, again, it's kind of the last 2 weeks of the season, really last week of the season, honestly, by the time that this episode comes out. So, all those guys who are going on the IL, you could probably just kick them off your team if you're not in a keeper league. And for the guys that are returning, specifically the pitchers, it's even questionable whether you want to add them onto your roster. And even with the hitters, it doesn't really make a ton of sense. But nonetheless, we are going to talk through these players because it still could be important for that last week of the season. But starting first with who is going on the injury list, we're starting with Kyle Isbell of the Royals going on the list with a left hamstring strain. His teammate Ryan Bergert is going on the list with a right elbow strain. Of course, not great to hear for a pitcher. Jose Quintana of the Brewers having a pretty decent year, all things considered. Going on the injury list, unfortunately finishing the season with a left calf strain. Wilson Contreras, he is dealing with a right shoulder strain, so unfortunate for both the Cardinals and your fantasy teams. Still a pretty decent catcher, so that's obviously going to hit a little bit. And Zach Neto, who we've talked about a couple times over the past couple of months, left hand strain for him. Super unfortunate. Obviously, he's one of the better shortstops, at least in the second half of the season. It has been. So losing him is probably going to be a pretty decent blow to your fantasy team.
Yeah, I was bummed to see Neto go down, have him on one of my teams. I was really hoping he'd get me a couple steals down the stretch, but can't, you're ecstatic with what you got from him this year. So be interesting to see how high the price is next year. It's definitely going to be up there. You're going to have to pay a pretty penny. And then Isbell going down, not really fantasy relevant for him, but it is relevant in terms of who it opens up opportunities for. It looks like Jack Haggs is basically an everyday role now for the rest of the season in KC. And then because he's in the field now, DH is a little more open for Carter Jensen, catcher DH prospect they just promoted. So just be nice to get a little longer of a look at those young guys going into next year.
Yeah, and the Royals are they're not really in the wild card race from last I checked, but
Yeah.
they're still kind of competing to get there. So that team is going to do everything that they can to make sure they win as many games down the stretch. So if that means putting in guys like Carter Jensen in a full time role, that's going to be exciting not just for the Royals but for your fantasy teams as well if you've got them.
Yeah, he had a multi-homer game earlier this week.
Yeah. All right, moving on to who's returned from the injury list. Paul Sewald. He's coming back for Detroit, but really more of middle relief guy, not really a high leverage guy right now. So maybe he's a source of holds, but it's unlikely to make a difference on your fantasy leagues. One guy who probably will, Cole Reagans of the Royals, 3.2 innings, 1 hit, 2 runs, 2 walks, and 4 strikeouts yesterday, I believe, in his return. He is currently lined up for a 2-start week next week with the Angels and the Athletics, but it kind of depends if Seth Lugo comes back from the injury list next week. He could still return. We'll talk about that in a little bit. But the Royals, right now, that's the way the rotation lines up, but I wouldn't be surprised if it ends up only being a 1-start wait for Reagans next week. Jordan Westberg of the Orioles, he's been back for the past couple games. He's DH'd and played third base. Should be getting everyday bats at the top of the order. I believe he was batting third in both those games. So if you have him on your team, that's a decent spot to have a guy like Westberg. Michael Wacha, his return, not great as I mentioned. 2.2 innings, 9 hits, 7 runs, no walks, and no strikeouts. He's got Toronto and the Athletics to finish out the season. The important thing about the Athletics start is that that's in Sacramento as well. So my opinion probably is just drop Wacha. Those two are not very good matchups, and not a big fan of having him in your roster if you can find a better alternative. Logan O'Hoppe of the Angels batted 5th in his first day back. Got an off day on Wednesday. Not sure if he's playing today on Thursday, but regardless, it looks like he's healthy at least. Jack Sawinski of the Pirates. He's the strong side platoon, but he's batting in the back half of the lineup, so not really super fantasy relevant there. Nolan Arenado of the Cardinals. He is back in the everyday lineup. He is currently batting in the middle of the order. Connor Norby of the Marlins. He's played third, and he's batted 6th in the last 2 games, so he is in the lineup, but not really in a premium spot to get a number of plate appearances. One name we've kind of mentioned a bunch, Michael Soroka of the Cubs. He's back, but as expected, he's in the bullpen. Not really a source of holds either, because in his most recent appearance, which I believe was like 2-3 days ago, he pitched like 30. He had 39 pitches. It kind of looks like he's being targeted more for a long relief role rather than any sort of high leverage situation right now. But that could change. And Adolis Garcia of the Rangers, he's played 3 out of 4 games in right field. He's batting 4th or 5th in the lineup. So still a little bit of a premium position for him, but the Rangers as a whole, the offense just isn't very good right now. So unless you really need to start Adolis, it's also one of those situations where you could probably find something else that's a little better.
Yeah, he's kind of fringe for sure. Looks like O'Hoppe's out of the lineup again today, so I guess they're just, taking it easy with him, being out of contention and all. So can probably find a catcher that's giving you a little bit more volume. And then, nice to see Reagans get back on the mound before the season ends. And Soroka, I was surprised that he's, being a reliever now, but I guess they ran out of time to kind of build him up. And Colin Reyes actually had a couple decent starts lately, combined with, the emergence of Cade Horton. So, maybe he'll get some high leverage looks in the postseason or something like that for them.
Yeah, it's kind of weird in that they brought up Javier Assad for, I think, a spot start coming up. But yeah, for some reason, well, like you said, they just haven't been able to stretch Soroka out long enough in his rehab assignment. So unfortunately, this is kind of where he is right now, even though he had a really nice middle of the season, I think, with the Nationals. It's kind of unfortunate that the fantasy season, at least for him, has not gone as well as maybe most people were hoping.
Yeah, exactly.
All right, in other injury news, a lot of this is going to be kind of like a we'll see if they come back for the last part of the season, but could be interesting. Some big names for sure. Nolan Shanuel, he is starting his rehab assignment for the Angels, but kind of like the same thing with O'Hoppe. I can't imagine they're rushing him back anytime soon. He just started one, and it's Thursday, so unless they just want to see him play like 5 more games, could be something to watch out, though, for Shanuel's decent. Adley Rutschman of the Orioles, he is also starting his rehab assignment. Wilyer Abreu of the Red Sox, Alex Cora says he's returning soon, so maybe sometime this weekend. Could be an interesting addition to an outfield if you've got him on your injured list. Junior Caramino, this is kind of a big one. He's currently day-to-day with back tightness. He was removed from Wednesday's start. Did not play Thursday, I think. If the Rays have a game today, but that's just something to monitor. Obviously, we talked about him. I think last week, Camarino is one of the is the second best third baseman I think this season. So obviously a huge blow if you're in the finals and you need a bat like Camarino. That's pretty much impossible to replace. Matt Wallner of the Twins, he is also day to day with back spasms as well. Jose Siriano of the Angels, he took a line drive to his pitching hand. Currently, the Angels are not necessarily putting him on the injury list just yet, but we'll see if he makes his start next week. Will Smith of the Dodgers, he is not going to be returning immediately from the injury list. He's been out since last week with that bruised hand, as we kind of talked about. So I think he was slated to maybe return middle of this upcoming week. So it looks like he might not even be back in time for the end of the regular season. Edward Cabrera of the Marlins, he could return to the last week of the season. I don't know how the Marlins starts are lining up though, so not sure if that's really something that you want to target, even with Cabrera, if he's healthy. Xavier Edwards of the Marlins, he's currently day to day with a wrist injury. Kyle Finnegan of the Tigers, he could return in the last week of the season. Kind of a source of saves or holds, more likely holds because Will Vest has kind of taken over that closer role, even though he's been a little shaky at times, but expect if Finnegan returns, he's kind of more as a setup man instead of the closer. Martin Perez of the White Sox, he left his start on Wednesday, unlikely to pitch for the rest of the season. Bo Bichette of the Toronto Blue Jays, they've officially said that he is not returning for the regular season. So he still might be targeting a return in the postseason, but he is not coming back, at least this year. Seth Lugo with the Royals, as we mentioned, he currently had a setback in his rehab, so he was slated to kind of return soon, but this setback has delayed him a little bit, so it's possible he actually doesn't even return for the end of the season. Keep track of that if you have Ragans on your team, because if it is a 2-star week for Ragans next week, that seems like a pretty interesting prospect for your fantasy teams. And then Yordan Alvarez, he's dealing with a significant left ankle sprain, according to manager Joe Espada. The Astros have not yet placed him on IL. I believe he suffered this injury on Monday, so it's been 3 to 4 days now. Unlikely he's returning for the regular season, but maybe this is more of the Astros kind of waiting to see what their playoff implications are if they end up winning the AL West or if they're in a wild card spot. But yeah, just kind of a unfortunate news for Alvarez, to be honest. It's been the injury-riddled season for him I took him pretty high in a couple drafts, like end of first round, beginning of second, and unfortunately, it just has not worked out for Alvarez this year.
Yeah, turned his ankle running across home plate. I guess he's just a bad injury luck type of guy, and he hasn't done enough to unfortunately shed the injury prone label quite yet, which is unfortunate because it seems like he was kind of on that trajectory until this year, which has almost been just a lost season. Not to, just talk about my own fantasy team, but I have my team that's playing in the third place game. My first two picks were Yordan Alvarez and Zach Wheeler, and then I lost Nate Eovaldi and Bo Bichette all in the last couple of weeks. So was playing a couple man short. So if I get third place, I won't be too disappointed about that.
Yeah, that if you do turn around, that could be pretty nice. Looking at Miami's schedule, they are scheduled to start in Philly at the first half of next week, and then the Mets in the second half of the week. So I don't know if I like Edward Cabrera in any of those matchups. Maybe against the Mets, but definitely against Philly, I don't love that at all.
Yeah, I just don't understand this. Like, they're out of it. He's had a lot of injuries in the past, and I think a lot of arm injuries too. And I know he had a great season. Like, if I'm the Marlins, I'd just say, it was great. You did a great job this year. Like, let's just call it a year and, get ready for next year. But I guess they're not too worried about the long-term ramifications of the injury.
Yeah. I mean, they have a 5-man rotation right now. There really is not necessarily a need for Cabrera to come back.
Yeah.
In some other news, Sean Manaea is currently placed on the paternity list. Obviously, he's returning from that soon, but not sure how that's going to affect his spot in the rotation in terms of where he's pitching. The Mets get the Nationals this weekend, and then they go to the Cubs, and then Miami after that, as we mentioned. So, congratulations to Manaea, but not sure when he's going to be back in the rotation. Trey Yeasavage, he is kind of the next prospect that made his big debut. 5 innings, 3 hits, 1 run, 2 walks, and 9 strikeouts. We'll talk about that start a little bit later. And then, some relatively decent big news. Clayton Kershaw is officially going to be retiring after this season. Obviously a big deal. One of the legends, but didn't really look the greatest this season, obviously. And we've had multiple discussions the past couple of weeks on what the Dodgers rotation looks like next year. And with Kershaw retiring, that kind of clears it up just a little bit more on what they might be doing. Is like they won't be going to a 7-man rotation. At least that's probably not going to happen now. But yeah, Kershaw retiring, that's obviously a big deal, and he's been a huge staple in fantasy, obviously for the past couple of years as well. But yeah, just good to see that his career is ending in kind of a positive way.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see if he can go out on top with the Dodgers. Looks like he's calling it, but it seems like Verlander wants to stick around another year. So I guess he's finishing the year really well. So I guess he's going to try to build on that. But yeah, I mean the two of those guys, two legends that I'm sure we both grew up watching. So it's going to be interesting to see the Dodgers without him, right? He kind of seems like he's just a fixture. It's been almost 20 years he's been on the team. So yeah, pretty crazy. But congrats to him.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see what Verlander does, what Scherzer does. Like Scherzer kind of had his entire season robbed because of just random injuries here and there, and he still looked decent in Toronto for bits and pieces. So would not be surprised if he runs it back again if he felt good this season. But Verlander, yeah, like you mentioned, did not look great at the beginning of the season, but has kind of come back as well and become like actually a decent like fantasy streamer in some respects too. So curious what he ends up doing next year as well.
Yeah.
All right, that's going to wrap it up for the injury news and notes. We're going to move on to player performances starting on Friday. Who we got?
Sure. So Friday the 12th, Justin Havelock was on our hitter recap with Chicken Soup for the Cole, which was a nod to debuting rookie Zach Cole of the Astros. Don't really have a lot of data on him yet, so I'm going to talk about somebody who's kind of been a steady, if you're more on the negative side, you could say boring, but kind of a steady, just nice all-around contributor for our teams for a few years now. That's Ian Happ, outfielder of the Cubs. He was 3 for 4 with a double, home run, 2 RBIs, and a walk. He had 2 barrels in the game, including his 21st homer of the season. And since then, he's hit a couple more. He's on a really nice stretch. He's up to 23 this year, including 7 in the last 30 days while batting over 300. So he's been a great ad for me, actually, in one of my leagues. And so far this season, his line is 243 with fewer steals than last year. So he's got 6 this year versus 13 last year, but the identical 243 average and about the same home run total and about the same runs and RBIs, around 160 combined runs and RBIs so far this year, which puts him on pace to get to about to the 175 he had last year. So he's kind of a guy who, I don't know if you're ever excited to draft him, but he's just a really nice, well-rounded contributor, like right outside the top 100. So how valuable is a guy like this in our shallower formats? Let's say our 12-team 3 outfield, where the upside's not super high, but you feel like the floor is pretty decent.
Yeah, he's like right on the fringe of like an outfielder 3, and by fringe, I really mean like he's just solidly an outfielder 3. But there's just times where he just drops off by a little bit, which is, that's kind of always been the story with Happ, that he hasn't been super consistent. Last year was one of the few years where he's been like really consistent and, is kind of contributing every single month. This year, it's actually kind of funny looking at his monthly splits. In June, he batted 208, but he had 9 homers, 16 runs, and 22 RBI. So if you ignore that average, pretty good month. His July was pretty awful, though. He batted 179, only had 3 homers there. So in that context, it's nice to see him kind of pick it up with, like you mentioned, 7 homers in his last, what was it,
last 30 days,
month. Yeah, basically. Mm-hmm. So impressive for him. He's cut down on the striker rate a lot this season, only 22% compared to 26% last year. And even though the slugging's been down a little bit, I think he's just reliable enough to have good outfielder 3 production. He's probably a little bit better in Roto League, but honestly, who isn't? So yeah, I think in at least, weekly 12-team leagues, I still like Ian Happ as like a really solid outfielder 3.
Yeah, I think that the potency of the Cubs offense like raises his floor a good amount. It gives him a decent baseline expectation. I do think like in 12-team leagues, I think you have to balance kind of risk with stability, because the replacement on the waiver wire, the replacement level is pretty high, right? So I was thinking about a team where I draft a lot based on projections, right? And sometimes the more boring guys fall in drafts because they don't have super high upside, but the projections really like them. So I ended up with a team with Ian Happ, right, Yandy Diaz, Alec Boehm, and Brian Reynolds, right? Those are like 4 kind of boring to super boring, stable veterans. But if you look at it, Happ's had a good year and Yandy Diaz had a great year, right? But at the same time, Reynolds was bad and Bohm was like slightly disappointing. So I think if I were to do it again, I'd want to get a couple of those guys, but I wouldn't want to draft all four of them because I think it's just a little bit too much kind of stability picks and not enough like risky picks. So I think that, kind of balancing that is important in our shallower leagues for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely true. It's like, Happ, he's just pretty much steady, like the guy who he is, right? And maybe that's similar to kind of Brian Reynolds, where it's like he's going to go between 20 to 25 homers, 5 to 10, 15 steals maybe in a good year, and then like, a mid to low 200s average, right? That's kind of what you're going to see from Happ day in and day out. So if you already have the risk elsewhere, then it's nice to have a guy like Happ because it kind of spreads out that risk a little bit more because you know what you're going to get from him.
Yeah, exactly. On the pitching side, on the 12th, hit me Bybee one more time was Nick's SP Roundup, which is a shout out to the, I believe, complete game shutout that Tanner Bybee threw. Kind of surprised we haven't used that Roundup title. That would be the first one that comes to mind with me and Tanner Bybee. But I'm actually going to talk about Sandy Alcantara of the Marlins. He was against the Tigers, got the win. 7 innings, 2 earned runs, 4 hits, no walks, and 8 strikeouts. 16 whiffs, 35% CSW, and 96 pitches. So the Marlins didn't trade Sandy at the trade deadline, as we all remember, after he had a really bad first half. Maybe they were thinking, they could get a better return this winter after Sandy did a little bit to kind of recover some value for them. And it seems like he's kind of doing that down the stretch a little bit. The changeup really shined in this one. 9 whiffs on 27 thrown, and he got a lot of outs in play as well, which helped the fastballs. And then the secondaries, the slider, curveball did really well too. And every pitch had a 70+% strike rate. So just kind of a dominant classic outing from vintage Sandy here. And he's starting to get a little bit back to the form that we're used to seeing from Sandy Alcantara before the season and before the elbow surgery. That's 6 quality starts in his last 7 outings. How much do we feel like he has kind of regained some value going into next year? I mean, we got to keep in mind the ratios are still really ugly. 5.48 ERA and 1.29 WHIP, but he is finishing the season really well.
Yeah, I think some positives are that the velocity is kind of staying steady. He was at 98.5 for his four-seamer this start, 96.9 in his sinker, which is about where he's been the entire season. So the fact that he's been able to kind of pitch this entire year, relatively healthy, I think is good to see. And I think it bodes well for next season that he refound the changeup a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. I feel good about Sandy. Do I feel good about him as like a top 10 guy? I don't think that's where I'm at with him, but could he be, someone that I trust like as an SP4 that it's got SP2 value? I think that's definitely possible for him, especially if, some of the things that he's kind of rediscovered in the last like 5-6 starts, that becomes what we see next year. And then, somehow if the Marlins just trade him to a better team, all of a sudden he goes from a guy who, can't get double-digit wins to someone who, has a better chance of getting that. And I think that's only going to help.
Yeah. I'm looking at where he went this year in drafts. Like clearly people were really confident in his ability to return and be at least close to his former self coming off the surgery. It looks like in the RotoWire OCs, he was 137 ADP, which is the 54th pitcher off the board. There's some closers in there, so he's probably more like SP40 to SP45. I don't think I can quite get there with him for that next year, but I don't think I'll be too far behind it, so I'll be interested to see where the price settles.
Yeah, I mean, if you look at just last 8 starts, right, in terms of just what his numbers are, let me see if I could find his ERA. It looks like 3.8 ERA with a 1 WHIP, right, over last 8 starts, which is like a pretty decent sample size for a pitcher. That's like about a third, a little fourth of his season. 24% strikeout rate, like that's pretty good. It's not ace level, but it is very serviceable.
Right, and I think the volume's going to be good too, right? Like he's thrown 160 innings coming off elbow surgery, and his previous 3 years before that, after not counting missing all of 2024, he was over 180. So I do think that he can be a guy you trust to make 30 starts a year. It's just a question of how much you're going to need to be worried about those ratios as opposed to banking them as a positive.
Yeah, it is going to be his age 30 season next year, even though he is 30 right now. His birthday was September 7th. So, he's not, in that like, dreaded like above 30 sort of range for a pitcher, especially with his workload. So, Yeah, I don't know. I feel good about Sandy next year. Maybe a little too good, but nonetheless, yeah, I would not mind picking him up in drafts next year.
Yeah, that he's younger than I expected, honestly.
Yeah, probably because he started so early, 2017. That's when he debuted with St. Louis. So, yikes. All right, moving on to Saturday. Saving Salvador from Kevin O'Brien, I believe referring to Salvador Perez, but we're going to talk about a different catcher, Ivan Herrera of the Cardinals. 3 for 5 with a double, a homer, 2 runs, an RBI, and a walk. Herrera hit his 16th homer of the season. It was a slugfest between the Cardinals and the Brewers. And yeah, just really decent season for Herrera. The Cardinals have not been good, in case you haven't been following the standings. But Herrera's had a solid season. He's hitting 280 with an 818 OPS. That's over 413 plate appearances. Like he did have that, I think it was like 6-week stint on the injury list with a broken finger or something like that. I can't remember exactly what the injury was, but regardless, he did miss some time. But in that time, he's in the time that he's actually played, pretty solid. 46 runs, 58 RBI, 8 stolen bases. Among all catchers, he's currently ranked 10th, according to the auction calculator from Fangraphs. The weird thing about Herrera, though, is that he might actually lose catcher eligibility next season. He's only at 14 games at catcher this year, which pretty much means that in all platforms besides Yahoo, he's considered a DH-only player next year. So with that knowledge, is Herrera even kind of worth targeting in drafts next year if all he has is util eligibility?
Yeah, I was thinking about this because I mostly play Yahoo and NFBC, and I knew he wouldn't have it in NFBC because you got to get to 20, but I wasn't sure about like ESPN or CBS, what they do. So yeah, Yahoo, you don't have to worry about it. In the other formats, I think it's like a late kind of dart pick, I guess. If you play in a league that has like 2 utility spots, like a lot of Yahoo leagues do, I feel like positional flexibility probably matters a little less because he's not clogging up your only utility spot. So I think it's kind of a format dependent play. If it's like an NFBC format, I think I'm probably waiting until like after pick 200 to go for him, just because there's no flexibility unless we hear that he's going to be catching like at least 2/3 of the game. So I think you kind of just got to stay tuned for news. It's kind of funny how the Cardinals, they have Herrera and they have Wilson Contreras, and neither one of them is playing catcher. Like it's kind of like the Padres are like the team full of shortstops. The Cardinals are like slowly becoming the team full of catchers. I don't know if that's going to work out for them.
Yeah, I don't know if there's another guy that's waiting in the wings to come up and take Pedro Baez' start, but yeah, Ivan Herrera, like there's definitely some nice like pop in his profile, but like a util only guy who can only get to like maybe 20 homers and 10 steals just doesn't really sound terribly exciting.
Right. I definitely believe in the offensive growth he's shown. Like he's been really solid both the past 2 years. So I think he's a comfortably above average hitter. It's just more contextual based on, how you have to construct a roster carrying a utility only guy like that.
Yeah. All right, moving on to pitching. Thanks to Nick for the no Alvarez for the Wicked, referring to Andrew Alvarez, who I frankly did not know. But he had a really nice start against the Pirates. We're not talking about him, though. We're talking about a different rookie, I think. I don't know if Andrew Alvarez is a rookie, but I'm going to assume he is. Regardless, Bubba Chandler, who he was actually pitching against. It was kind of ironic. Went up against the Nationals, 6 innings, 1 run, 2 hits, no walks, and 7 strikeouts. Got the no decision, though. Both Alvarez and Bubba Chandler finished with no decisions in this game. But yeah, after months of waiting, we finally got the Bubba Chandler start that everyone was waiting for. Executed the Blake Snell blueprint very well to left-handers, had 4-seamers up and changeups kind of in the bottom half of the zone. If you looked how he was facing righties, it was kind of hilarious. It was actually like all fastballs upstairs. He had 17 4-seamers upstairs and then 2 sliders that were also upstairs. So he kind of just ignored the bottom half of the zone when pitching against righties. But that worked out for him because all his fastballs were coming in at 99 miles an hour against those righties. Yeah, just really good start for him, and he didn't even really need to use that slider because, again, he was facing a bunch of lefties. The problem for Chandler is that he plays for the Pirates, and we've kind of seen that you really need to be an elite pitcher to even get double-digit wins. Paul Skeens got 10 wins in 31 starts this year, and as good as Chandler is, I don't think he's Skeens level just yet. And, we don't really have that much data on Chandler as well because, again, he was mostly in his major league appearances has been kind of a reliever as opposed to a starter. But assuming that he's able to contribute in like ERA, whip, and strikeouts, is that enough to make Chandler kind of a top 50 pitcher that you're targeting in 2026? Or would you kind of rather pass on the rookie and go after someone a little bit more established in that role?
Yeah, I mean, I think I would be interested in in him as a top 50 pitcher. I think he's going to be going higher than that. If it's not too much higher, I'll be interested. But I think that, rookies, especially that have this much prospect pedigree and this loud of stuff, they get really pushed far up the board. So I wouldn't be surprised to see him going inside the top 100. But yeah, if he's more around SP 50, I'd definitely be in. His fastball is like a great foundation for his arsenal, right? Like you said, he throws it a lot. He's not afraid to put in the zone. It's got like a 60 grade in scouting reports, right? It sits 98 flat. It's pretty flat and hoppy. He can use it to hitters of both handedness. So I think that just kind of makes a great floor for him. And the workload is going to be probably a little bit limited, but not terribly so. I mean, last year he had 120 innings. This year he's at 120, probably going to get close to 130. So, you could forecast 140 to 150 next year, and that's not too far off, like a full-time guy. So maybe in a quality start league, get a little bit of a knock because they might not just let him go. But overall, yeah, I think SP50 would be a pretty fair price.
Yeah, I think he probably has more hype than Jared Jones. And I was just looking at Jared Jones earlier this season. His ADP was at 51. And I don't know how much of that was skewed by the fact that he got hurt.
Hmm.
But I think that happened during the season as opposed to before. Regardless, Jared Jones was going off the board at SP 51, and kind of in that range, depending on what site you were playing at. I think Bubba Chandler is probably going to be going higher than that. I think there's just more hype around him than Jones, even though we saw a great season, or some great starts from Jones in 2023, or sorry, 2024, I should say. But yeah, I think the hype around Bubba is just a little bit more there. So yeah, would not be surprised if he ends up going earlier than what Jones was going at.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see like him versus Mizorowski because Mizorowski looked untouchable his first couple starts, but clearly has fallen back to earth a little bit. So I think they'll probably be going around like pretty similar places. I think maybe I'd prefer Mizorowski in most formats, but I'll have to dive into it a little more in the offseason.
Yeah.
Going to the 14th, Sunday, Kevin O'Brien was on our hitter recap with Colby Jack for Colby Thomas, outfielder on the A's. I'm going to be talking about another outfielder, though, and that is Mickey Moniak, outfielder now on the Rockies, in case you haven't been keeping up. He's not with the Phillies anymore. He had a great day on Sunday, 4 for 4 with 2 homers and 2 steals, so kind of like the double combo meal there, along with 2 runs and 5 RBIs. And it's kind of been a breakout season for Mickey Moniak, a guy who's kind of been on the fringe of major league rosters the last couple of years. He's really earning his keep in Colorado. Aside from this great outing, his season-long line is really solid. He's hitting 268 with an 815 OPS and 425 plate appearances, 21 homers, 9 steals, and 62 RBI. He does still swing and miss a decent amount, but he's keeping the K rate in check a little bit at 24%. I'm sure Colorado is helping out with that a little bit. But yeah, it looks like this could be a nice fit for him. Are we buying into this? Do we think that this is just going to end up being like a way outlier type year? Do we think that he can carve out like a decent platoon role in an offensive friendly environment?
Being in Colorado really helps out Moniak. I mean, he doesn't really hit the ball that hard. 32.3% hard contact rate. So 1 out of 3 plate appearances is ending in hard contact, which is still pretty decent. But cutting down that striker rate is huge for him. And I think the BABIP at 309 is pretty real considering he's in Colorado as well. Yeah, I mean, if he can be like a 20-ish homer, 10 steal guy, that will contribute in 15 teams. I don't think he's contributing in a 12-teamer, but yeah, I see no reason to not think that Moniak could do this again, assuming he stays in Colorado.
Yeah, I think when you consider the offensive environment is obviously a plus, but there's very few Colorado hitters that are startable on the road. And when you consider that he sits against some lefties, I think that definitely relegates him to streamer status in 12 teamers. But like you said, I think he's like a guy you would hold in 15 teamers and yeah, plug him in mostly when he's at home, but maybe sometimes on the road if he's facing weak righties. But yeah, he barrels the ball up a decent amount, even if he doesn't have a ton of hard hit balls. And he does pull the ball in the air a lot. So it seems like he's kind of finding his power stroke a little bit. And obviously there's no better place to, experience an offensive breakout than Colorado. So nice to see, a former number 1 pick who was kind of written off, kind of, bounce back and earn his keep as like a major league regular.
Yeah, I think, having a 271 average, I think is what I've got right now. It's like, that's That's pretty solid. He doesn't walk a lot, which is kind of
Yeah.
unfortunate. But if you're not in the OPP league, it does not matter at all. And the slugging at 522 is like pretty impressive. So, um, yeah, I think staying in Colorado would be really good for his career. And if that ends up working out, then I could definitely see you taking a late round flyer on him.
Yeah, yeah, maybe he can be like what people are hoping Michael Toglia might be coming into the season. He clearly has too much of a contact issue to make it work, but Moniak swings and misses a little bit less, so maybe he can, have some success with that profile.
Yeah, it's kind of impressive considering that in 2023 he had a 35% strikeout rate over 324 plate appearances. So
Jeez.
being at 24% is really good for him.
Yeah, he's come a long way.
Yeah.
On the pitching side, on the 14th, set your Mazers. Stan was next SP Roundup title for Adam Mazer of the Marlins, who's had a couple good starts lately. I'm going to be talking about someone who's been way more hyped up, though, and is probably like the best pitcher in the league in the past month, honestly. That's Nolan McLean of the Mets. He went against the Rangers, but did take the no decision despite throwing 6 scoreless innings, 5 hits, 2 walks, 7 strikeouts, only 4 whiffs, but a 28% CSW on 92 pitches. So a lot of called strikes, which kind of makes sense because he is a sinker sweeper guy, but he also has a super deep arsenal, mixes in a four seam, cutter, changeup, curveball. So he's got a deep arsenal, 6 pitches there, and his numbers so far are crazy. He's made 6 starts, 4-1, 1.19 ERA, 40 strikeouts in 37.2 innings, and a .98 whip. So he's been fantastic. I mean, if you added him, he's like a league winner type. But looking forward towards next year, right? We just talked about Bubba and Mizorowski. There's kind of a host of pitching prospects who have gotten some work this year, but maybe not graduated from prospect status. So we have Bubba and Mizorowski. We got McLean. We got Burns, Tong, and then some more secondary guys, Yeasavage, Peyton Tolley, Connolly Early, Luis Morales. Who's kind of the sticking out as the best of the bunch for you? Is it McLean because of his results so far? Or are you leaning more towards somebody else?
Yeah, McLean's kind of weird because he's got an 11% swinging strike rate, but a 32% called strike plus whiff. Like
Ton of horizontal movement on his pitches, yeah.
yeah, relying that much on called strikes to get a 27.5% strikeout rate is kind of nuts, to be honest. Um, I don't know. I think if I was really going to choose between all these guys, like part of me really likes Burns, but playing in Great American Small Park is a little scary. I think probably just the de facto answer I would just go through is probably Mizorowski. If I had to pick like a young pitcher that I feel good about picking up next year, partially it's just because of the Brewers' development. Mizorowski too, like didn't have as many walk issues. Like the control was a little bit better in the majors than it was in the minors, where he was just walking everyone. So yeah, but McLean I think is just up there as well. I think it's just the fact that he relies so much on these called strikes is what scares me a little bit.
Yeah, he relies a lot on called strikes, and he's not necessarily a strike thrower, so it's kind of a difficult combination. I think that, yeah, him and Mizorowski might both have whip risk because of the walks, but Mizorowski gets a lot more strikeouts in all likelihood, so maybe that gives him the leg up. McLean also has a problem against lefties, it seems like. With the sinker sweeper arsenal, he's amazing against righties, 26% strikeout minus walk rate. But against lefties, he's walking almost 5 per 9 or 13%. So his K minus walk is 14%, which is still decent, but a 13% walk rate is pretty troubling. So, he might be someone that you have to have a little bit of hesitance with against lefty heavy lineups. And for the type of pick, you're probably going to have to invest in him. You don't want to be overthinking matchups too much. So it's always fun when a rookie goes off like this, but then at the same time, I'm just thinking about, wow, like I'm not going to be able to get them next year. They're going to go for way too much and, way too high of a pick in the draft. So
Yeah, I'm curious how his changeup develops over the offseason because that's kind of the main whiff. At least is designed to be the main whiff pitch against lefties, but it's only got an 8% swing strike rate. It's got a 60% called strike rate though against lefties. So this man is just getting called strikes. Like it doesn't matter like what pitch he's using or whoever he's facing. Like he's gonna get called strikes, which I think is pretty impressive.
yeah, it seems to be his kind of lowest rated stuff pitch and his worst in his scouting report. So if that took a step forward, that could go a long way for him.
Yeah. All right. Moving on to Monday. Thanks to Christian Oneman for the Lao Lao Crocodile hitter recap article. We're going to talk about Sal Stewart of the Reds. 3 for 5 with a homer, 3 runs, and 2 RBI. Sal's been off to a really good start to his young career. He's only through 45 plate appearances, but he's already got 4 home runs. He's got 9 runs and 6 RBI. No steals just yet. But he is really solid, and he's still available at 84% of Yahoo leagues. The strikeout rate is a very palatable 18%. And I mean, the home run to fly ball rate is not sustainable. Obviously, he's got 4 of them in 4 to 5 plate appearances. Would not expect that to be sustainable whatsoever. But at least it looks like he's got a home in since he's crowded infield. He was playing first base for a while, but Spencer Steer came back recently, and now that has moved Stewart to play third base at times as well. But the Reds seem pretty keen on getting him everyday at bats. He's got some interesting eligibility based on where you have him. I think in some leagues he's got second and third. Some he's got first, second, third. We'll kind of see how that shakes out next season with where his positional eligibility ends up being. Would not be surprised if he kind of sticks at first base, but we'll see what the Reds' plans are him. Regardless, Sal Stewart, it's a very incredibly small sample size. It's 13 games, 45 plate appearances. There's not really a lot that you can draw from it, but regardless, do you think he's going to be a fun target in late rounds of drafts, or is there maybe even enough prospect hype that he goes a little bit earlier than he should?
Yeah, I mean, based on this strong stretch, the price might get pumped up a little bit, but I'd be interested later in the draft. I think I wouldn't want him as my only first baseman, but I'd be happy with him as an option. He's played the last 2 games at third base, so it seems like maybe he'll hold on to that double eligibility, which would be huge. But yeah, like you said, strikeout rate's low. He did great in the minors this year. He's showing a ton of power, and they clearly have confidence in him. They're hitting him cleanup right now in their playoff chase. So yeah, I think I'd definitely be interested in him. It's these type of corner guys do pop up a lot, like Christian Encarnacion Strand, right? People were super excited about him 2 years ago, and now he's stuck in AAA. So, I think we have to be wary a little bit of investing in guys like this too much, who might have great fantasy upside, but real life value is a little bit lower. But at the same time, he's, a pretty hyped prospect. So I think he's going to get a lot of chances to succeed. And he's definitely making the most of it so far.
Yeah, I'd be really curious about his minor numbers in terms of what his hard hit rate is, just because of how insane it is in the majors right now. It's like you just can't really trust the fact that he's got a 50% hard hit rate. Like, that is just not going to happen in next season once he's in the majors the entire year. So, yeah, curious how that number looks in the minors, but regardless, I think he's going to be a very interesting prospect to look at next year if he somehow gets that multi-position eligibility.
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, moving on to pitching, as we kind of mentioned, Trey Yeasavage. Yeasavage in the box score was the SB Roundup title. As we mentioned, 5 innings, 1 run, 3 hits, 2 walks, and 9 strikeouts. Yeasavage has a very super over-the-top arm action. He's got a 4-seamer, a splitter, and a slider as his 3 pitches. All of them are coming out pretty much at the same slot. The fastball's got a 0.3 height adjusted vertical attack angle. It makes it a little steeper than other fastballs. And then that kind of helps with the splitter, which has a negative 1.5 height adjusted vertical attack angle. So those 2 pitches together really worked well, such that the splitter in this start got 11 out of 19 whiffs. Slider was pretty decent as well. Not necessarily, getting a ton of whiffs, but I think it got 4 total. But he finished 3 strikeouts with that pitch. Was pretty good against lefties as well with kind of the back foot slider. Yeah, really good control overall. I mean, if you look at the slider just by itself, it looks like it's all over the place, but I think that's kind of the point for him, is to use it in different spots. And it's just more for a bridge to allow the splitter to work really well between the 4-seam and the split. The thing with the 4-seamer, though, so like the metrics, if you just look at it in a vacuum, it's like, 20% of IVP, that's really good. But the fact that he goes over the top kind of belies how useful that is. He's got a minus 0.4, I believe that's inches, horizontal position on the fastball. He's literally just throwing it like over the top. So I don't know. With more tape on the rookie, like those types of pitch shapes become a little bit easier to hone in on. He gets Kansas City next week, so that should be a pretty good start and kind of a good final week opportunity to sneak in a win for Yeasavage. But, let's just assume he makes the rotation next year for Toronto. Is this a guy that you'd like to look at, in late in drafts, or kind of what we talked about with, Bubba Chandler, with Nolan McLean? Like, do you think he's just going to go a little higher than what you'd like to pay the price for?
Yeah, I'll be interested to see. I think the major league workload is going to be small enough that he won't go crazy high unless he just like has a great playoffs. I think if he's cheaper than like the McLean, Chandler, Mizorowski, Burns, that group, I'll definitely be interested. If he's in that group, I don't think I will. This is his first full professional season, similar to Chase Burns. So he's only thrown like 100 innings. So I don't think the workload is going to be quite as free as, Chandler next year or even Mizorowski maybe. So that gives me a little bit of trepidation. But otherwise, he's a super interesting pitcher. I mean, if you're like a pitching nerd like I am, like you've known about him for a while and you know that he's just so weird. Like he doesn't throw any pitches that move arm side. His slider, or he doesn't throw any pitches that move glove side. His slider moves arm side because of how over the top he is. Like it's just such an unconventional look. And I worry that he only has three pitches, but I also think they can all work against both sides of the plate. So I'm not, it's not a huge concern. But I do think that you're right that once they get a little more tape on him and they see him a little bit, he might get roughed up a bit. I do think that he'll be a great strikeout source though. Like he was putting up similar numbers to Jonah Tong in the minors with a 40% strikeout rate. So clearly that upside is there, which is really nice.
Yeah, it's really funny with his splitter. It's got 11 inches of horizontal movement, and then the slider's got like 2.7. Because it's just because of the way he throws it, it is still breaking arm side, even though you would kind of expect a slider to break more glove side. Just naturally speaking, like that's kind of how we've always pictured sliders as breaking. But it's funny that it's got that positive break on that pitch.
Yeah, when he buries the splitter from like that 7 foot tall release point, it dives like crazy. It's really cool.
Yeah, I'm curious though, because like his extension in the last couple of starts is at 6.2. I mean, that's a little different than release point. Um, but I'm surprised it's not more. I should say.
Yeah, I think it's like because of how high he throws from, he
Sure.
doesn't get
Yeah.
out in front, so he doesn't
Yeah.
have a lot of extension. Like I think it's kind of it's not a one or the other type thing, but I think they
Hmm.
do kind of have a negative correlation.
Right. And he's not. I mean, he's tall, 6'4", but he's not like as tall as like some of those other guys that you think of that have these types of over the top windups. So.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. So going to the 16th on the hitting side, Scott McDermott was on the hitter recap within the Canzone. And then I'm going to be talking about the title man. That's Dominic Canzone, outfielder for the Mariners. Had a career day on Tuesday, 5 for 5 with 3 home runs, more than 1,200 feet of home runs. So average distance of over 400 feet. And all 5 of his hits with 2 strikes. So really boosting his season long and career 2 strike numbers right there, showing a great approach at the plate. The first one did come off of Michael Waka, and he hit it 2 more later in the game. And yeah, Canzone's kind of been a quiet breakout. He's been on the big side of a platoon in Seattle and is helping them down the stretch in their division race. And it looks like his strong batting line is backed up by hard hit, and batted ball quality statistics. He's got a 47% hard hit rate, 92% average exit velocity, and 13% barrel rate, all solidly above average. And I think the barrel rate's probably borderline elite, honestly. He's hitting over 300, 302, 361, 488 slash line, 10 home runs in 73 games. So he's putting together a really solid half season. Do you view him like, let's compare him to like Mickey Moniak, I guess. Like, who would you prefer in that, right? I know it's not the most exciting conversation, but two guys who are, putting together really solid seasons and getting on our fantasy radar.
Yeah, I think though. I guess maybe the weird thing with Moniak is at least half his games are in cores. Like with Canzone, it's he is platooning, basically like just faces righties, and he plays his games in Seattle, which like the numbers look great this season. Obviously, they for the small sample size that it is, they look pretty solid. But it's hard for me to just like trust to have a guy on like this on my team if I don't have like a deep bench. If I have a deep bench, then sure, I'll have Dominic Canzone on my team and just put him in for the matchups that he's starting. But I think I would actually rather have a guy like Mania because I just think he's going to get more playing time than Canzone is.
Yeah, yeah, I get what you mean. I think if you put him in the same venue, it's Canzone all day, but I do think that the context matters here, and I'm probably leaning Moniak as well.
Yeah. Well, it's also a big if Mania goes back to Colorado as well, right? That's kind of the thing. And maybe Canzone can, get himself carve himself out a nice little role as maybe the starting right fielder. But Seattle just refuses to have him start against lefties. So it just makes it a little tougher to trust him, especially if you're in a weekly league. If you're a daily league and you got a deep bench, right, I think it could make sense to have him.
Yeah, it does lower the ceiling of the profile a little bit. On the pitching side, Jose, my name was Nick's SP roundup, which was for Jose Suarez, who came back to the majors and had a great 7 inning outing in, I believe it was a doubleheader between the Nats and the Braves. But I'm going to be talking about Clay Holmes of the Mets. He was against the Padres in this one. He was like the opener bulk pitcher, followed by Sean Manaea, who went 5 innings and got the win. Holmes took the no decision, pretty mediocre outing, 4 innings, 2 earned, 3 hits, 1 walk, 2 strikeouts, 5 whiffs, and a 34% CSW, only 53 pitches, as he has been limited a little bit down the stretch here. And it's been a tough rank for Holmes for a couple months because this is his first season in the majors as a starter. So the Mets have been taking it easy with him down the stretch. Manaea looked honestly better than Holmes with 5 innings of 1 run ball, 4 strikeouts. And they look like they could be a really potent kind of 1-2 pairing going forward the rest of the regular season and maybe the playoffs. I'm going to focus on Holmes here. I think he was kind of overvalued in draft season. I know he got pumped up because he was getting stretched out and, he has a nice sinker and all that, but his season has been decent overall, but not great for fantasy. 155 innings, 11 wins, 3.77 ERA, which is fine. But the 1.34 whip and only 125 strikeouts, I think have been a little bit of a negative. So do we kind of think that this is what Holmes is as a starter? Or do we think that he can build on this and kind of take a step forward next year and be a little more valuable?
I mean, I'd like to believe it could get better. He had 155 innings this season, as you mentioned. If you can get that up to like 160, 170, sure, I'd take that. The strikeout rate being as down as it was, though, I think is what scares me the most, right? It kind of reduces him to a guy who's like maybe a premium starter, but even then I hesitate to call him that if he's just not getting strikeouts. Clearly, the numbers, if you just compare them to when he was a reliever, it's a lot more dominant when he's a reliever in terms of his strikeout numbers. I'll admit I was one of those people who probably pumped up the helium a little bit on Clay Holmes, and I don't think I'm going to be in it again. Even if he gets the same volume next year, like 150, 160 innings, I don't know if they're going to be really high quality innings. And I also don't know if the Mets are just going to try to do some of this more piggybacking down the stretch, and that really the next season, I should say. And that's really going to hurt his value, obviously.
Yeah, I'm hoping they'll let him work a little bit deeper next year. I do think it's kind of a case of real life versus fantasy value, though. Like the Mets are super happy to get 155 innings of a 3.77 ERA because they're trying to prevent runs. That's all they care about. Whereas we care about strikeouts, right? We care about whip. And he's not going to have a good whip because he allows a lot of ground balls, which get through sometimes for hits. And he walks a lot of guys, right? 8 to 10% walk rate guy for his career. So I do think that does kind of put a cap on what his ceiling can be and also lowers the floor a little bit. So I think I'm probably gonna leave him out there for other people to draft, even though I think he can be a decent volume source. I'd probably prefer someone like Sandy, right, who definitely has ERA risk, no doubt about that, right? But when he's going well, like I think he can provide more strikeouts and a better whip too.
Yeah, what's crazy is Clay Holmes has 30 starts, 155 innings. So he's basically averaged like 5 innings per start, which really means like it's a lot of 4 innings and a lot of occasional 6 inning starts here and there. So I mean, I like that the Mets have stuck with him as a starter. I just don't like the way that they're using him. And even though it makes complete sense from a real baseball standpoint, like you mentioned, just from fantasy, it just isn't that valuable anymore.
Yeah.
All right. Finally, moving on to Wednesday. A Time to Kill Baseballs by Trent Grisham was the hitter recap article by Kyle Stanzel. And we're going to talk about Trent Grisham, who absolutely destroyed my Twins with 2 homers, went 2 for 5 with 2 hits, and got 4 RBI on those 2 homers. He's up to 33 on the season. I'm actually surprised we didn't talk about Trent a little bit more, but I looked in our archives. I think we last talked about him in May. But yeah, he's been absolutely crushing this year. And the 33 homers is kind of notable because he's actually hit a total of 39 in 1,099 at-bats between 2022 and 2024. So he essentially tripled his output this season. Of course, being a lefty that plays at Yankee Stadium, that's super helpful. But he did decrease his strikeout rate this season, going from 27% to 22.6%. So improvement there. His hard contact rate also is pretty solid. It's a measly 29%, but and actually it's in line with where he was at last year, but it's improved from the year before that. So he's finally seeing some of those gains come in terms of actual counting stats. His barrel rate did go up by 1.5%. So an increase there, but not like a massive one. That being said, he's slashing 240, 348, 477, which are all career numbers for him. He's got 150 runs plus RBI combined. Again, career numbers for him as well. The BABIP improvement might seem like it's kind of crazy. He jumped from 217 to 252 this year, but it's actually kind of below his career average. His career average is 264, which is kind of impressive when you consider that he played a lot of his games in San Diego as well. That's definitely known a bit more as a pitcher's park, I believe, rather than a hitter's park. So, solid numbers for Grisham regardless. Some other stats to point at too: his pull air rate jumped from 20% to 24% in 2025. So definitely taking advantage of being in Yankee Stadium a little bit there as well. And he kind of reminds me to last year's outfielder darling in Jurickson Profar. Profar was a top 10 outfielder by the end of the season, but both of them saw improvements in their strikeout rate and increase in their BABIP. Profar had an NFBC ADP of 192, so going around rounds 12 to 16, 46th outfielder off the board. So really solidly like kind of an outfielder 3 util type of guy, kind of like what we were talking about with Ian Happ. Grisham is going to be a free agent this offseason, so if he doesn't return to the Yankees, are you still looking ahead of him in those rounds? Or, is this season just kind of a nice story, but ultimately, if he ends up leaving the Bronx, it's not really worth taking a look at?
Yeah, hopefully he doesn't have the using PED thing in common with Jurickson Profar. Hopefully the
That's true.
comparison stops there. But it is going to be dependent on where he signs, right? He's definitely earned himself a lot of money this season, that's for sure. I think it's going to depend on where he goes and what the lineup context looks like. Like he's a guy who could hit leadoff in an offense, but he could also hit like seventh, right? So I do have a little concern. Like if he's hitting at the bottom of an order, I think that's going to really hurt my interest. But also it's hard to know that for sure before the season starts. So you just got to kind of try your best to feel it out. But he has made like all the changes you'd want to see, right? He's striking out less. He's walking more. He's hitting the ball harder. He's making more contact. He's pulling the ball in the air more. Like that ticks all my boxes. So I'll definitely be monitoring his price in the offseason for sure. But at the same time, he hit below 200 each of the last 3 years, right? And maybe there's some batted ball luck there, but you got to be aware of the floor. And I think might be the craziest stat I've seen in a while. He's got 33 home runs. Would you like to guess how many doubles he has?
Ooh, I'm not going to look it up. I'm going to say, well, he's got a 477 slug, right?
Yep. Usually I feel like
it's got to be like 10.
He has 9 doubles the whole season. I don't think I've ever seen somebody have that many home runs and single digit doubles before.
Okay, now that you mention that, I just want to look up what his home road splits are for homers, because I can't imagine they are even.
I feel like for power hitters, they usually have like more home runs than doubles, and like slap hitters and more doubles than home runs, but I've never seen that big of a split.
Trent Grisham, 21 homers away, 12 homers at home.
Oh, so he's hitting everywhere, I guess.
Wow. Okay, I thought this was full on Yankee Stadium being Yankee Stadium, but turns out Grisham's like not that bad. That being said, he did hit 2 homers against the Twins yesterday in Target Field, so I'll stop complaining, I guess. I don't know. The book on him is going to be super interesting because, like you said, he's been awful between 2022 and 2024. Serviceable actually in OBP leagues because his walk rate's so high. But yeah, this man was batting the Mendoza line for the last 3 seasons. And then his OBP for those 3 seasons, 284, 315, 290. Like serviceable numbers in some OBP leagues. But the power spike this year has been really impressive to see. Hopefully it continues wherever he plays, because clearly actually it looks like he can hit wherever he wants to. So
yeah, he has regressed a bit defensively, so you'd hope that wouldn't affect his playing time, but I guess we'll see.
Yeah, I'm curious if there's any team with like an open DH spot, but yeah, maybe the Phillies take him if they don't re-sign Schwarber. I don't know. Anyways, going on to pitching, thanks to Nick for the Who Would Have Fought SB Roundup article, and we are going to talk about Brandon Pfaadt because what a night he had. 9 innings, no one runs, 1 hit, 1 walk, 7 strikeouts, getting the no decision somehow. But yeah, he I guess he technically had a Maddox. All right, it's a complete game with under 100 innings, under 100 pitches. His arsenal right now is pretty much going 4-seamer changeup to lefties, sinkers, and breakers to righties. And if he can command it well enough, it works out. Had a lot of good fortune, though, in this one. He had 20 balls in play and just 1 hit and an error as well. It wasn't a pristine outing from him, but also you look at the pitches he had, and it's like, did he really deserve 9 innings of 0 earned runs? Who's to say? He did it though, which is impressive. We briefly mentioned Pfaadt last week in our discussion on Ryan Nelson. Barring some changes to the rotation for the D-Packs next season, maybe they do something in the offseason. I don't know, but they did just spend a lot of money on Corbin Burns, and that didn't work out super well. Pfaadt looks like he's going to be a starter next year, probably the number 3, number 4 guy in that rotation. Unfortunately, he's just not a top 100 pitcher right now. I think looking at the auction calculator, he was like 178. But he had an NFBC ADP of 178 this season. So, kind of going in rounds 12 to, I guess 15-ish. So, with that in mind, obviously, I think he's going to be drafted later than that. But is he someone who you might be still worth to take like a late round draft pick on, or are you kind of out on Pfaadt for 2026?
Yeah, I mean, this game you can file it under like where on earth did this come from, right? Like he had a lot of hype coming into the season and didn't deliver, and I guess he's ending on a high note. I have a little bit of interest in him, but he's always gone higher than I would like him to. So I've kind of found myself passing. He just has struggled to find like a coherent approach against lefties. His slider sweeper was always his calling card coming up, and it's not an effective pitch against lefties, so he struggled to get them out. And I think he's made some small improvements in that area this year. Like the K to walk has gone up a little bit, and it's closer to his numbers against righties. But at the same time, I'm still a little worried about the ratio risk. I usually like to buy low on guys that are really underperforming their ERA estimators, which he's done for his whole career. But at a certain point, it's like if you keep doing it, that's just the type of guy that you are, right? Like someone like Andrew Heaney, right, is always outperformed or underperformed his ERA estimators. And it turns out he's just not great, right? He's just a kind of a slightly below average pitcher. So I kind of would need to see it a little more before I could buy in on Pfaadt again.
Yeah, I'm kind of impressed by 11 quality starts. Like, that's not bad. But it does mean the other 20 that he's had have been pretty atrocious in order to get that 5.02 ERA.
Right. I mean, we're looking at like potentially back-to-back seasons of 180 innings, right? So he's a reliable source of volume. It's just like, what quality are you getting along with it?
Right. It's also weird that the striker rate has gone down season by season too. It's a little worrying. Yeah. All right. Well, that is going to wrap it up for the player performance recap, and we are going to move on to, I think, the last streamer segment of the season, because you're not going to be streaming anyone next week unless your league is weird. So, yeah, who do we got as kind of the final recommendations here?
Yeah, I'm hoping we can end on a high note. Last week was great. Just a quick recap of 2 weeks ago. Jose Quintana, we thought he wouldn't get the second start. He did, but it wasn't great. 4 innings, 3 earned, 2 strikeouts, 1.5 whip. But last week, recommendations were 4 for 4, I'd say, so far, knock on wood. Jamison Tyone, first start, was 6 scoreless, got the win. Only 3 strikeouts, but 0.67 whip. Jason Alexander, first start. This was probably the most disappointing one. It wasn't bad. 4 2/3, 1 run, 5 strikeouts, 1.29 whip. Tyler Wells, great outing against the White Sox, 6 innings, 1 run, four strikeouts, and a 0.67 whip again. And then Michael McGreevy, like you said, got the win, best of the bunch, 7 scoreless, 6 strikeouts, 0.86 whip. So 3 for 4 there, with hopefully Alexander delivering on the weekend. This week we're going back to Tyler Wells. Why not? He seems to be in a groove right now. He's 33% Yahoo, 17% CBS, so getting added up a little bit more. He gets at home against the Rays, which is a decent matchup. Not as good as the ones he's had recently, but still nothing you're running away from. Second one is Chad Patrick, now in the Brewers rotation after Jose Quintana was put on the IL. He's 5% Yahoo, 14% CBS. Home against Cincinnati, so Reds carpet, definitely a wins play. This one, very deep. Kaiwei Tang of the Giants, 5% Yahoo, 2% CBS. Home against the Rockies, that's pretty much all there is to it. Also a wins play because he doesn't work super deep into games. And then lastly, this is a volume play. If you need a 2-start week, you can look at Ian Seymour of the Rays, who's been pretty good this year, 21% Yahoo, 43% CBS. But the matchups aren't great, which is why it's a volume-only play at Baltimore and at Toronto. So looks like we're finished on a high note with streamers. Hopefully that's the case next week as well when we recap these guys.
Yeah, there was a fun moment like middle of the season where there was an argument that Chad Patrick was like rookie of the year contention.
Yeah.
which was really funny. Like, because the numbers weren't very good for him, but it was like, oh, everyone else just isn't that good. But yeah, since that point, he's kind of fallen back to earth a little bit. Yeah, like that against Cincinnati for sure, especially for the Brewers, who, they're very comfortably in the NL Central lead, but I'm sure they're still trying to compete and finish with the number one seed in the National League, regardless. So they'll still be competing down the stretch.
Mm-hmm.
All right, well, that wraps it up for this episode. Again, you can find us on This Week PL on Twitter. Send us your comments or questions at thisweekplpod@gmail.com. You can find myself on Twitter at @TheJohnCuh. We have Patrick on Twitter at pfitzgerald_99. If you haven't done so already, please subscribe to the Pitch List podcast feed on Apple, Spotify, YouTube. Wherever you listen, make sure you leave us a 5-star review if you enjoy the show. And lastly, sign up for Pitch List Pro. By doing so, you can join us on the Pitch List Discord, get advice from all the fantasy experts and writers over there in your championship weekends, or maybe the last weekend of Roto. But yeah, that is all for this week. We'll be back next week with the final episode of the regular season of This Week in Fantasy Baseball. For Patrick, I'm John, and we'll see you in the next one. Later, everyone.